Hello again, friends. Back at it on the 2016 Scout. Today I'm going to try to take the triple tree off, check those bearings. I did order bearings just in case I need them. I did the bearings on the 2018 because it had a front end collision. And so whenever there's any front end collision, you can almost guarantee that the front bearings will have gotten pinched somehow. So I replaced them on that one. I shouldn't have to on this one. I don't think there's been any damage here. But I'm gonna take it all apart again, clean it all out, see what's there, and see whether or not if I need to replace them. So that's job one. After that, we'll see how much energy I have left. Okay, I have a feeling as soon as I start jerking around on this, the GoPro is probably gonna go flying, but we'll see how long that lasts. So this is a 30mm socket to get that top nut off. Gotta go hard left, make sure you're not pinching anything. In my case, those bolts are a little annoying. Ow, that's my stitches. Don't do that. All right, time to get a hammer. There we go. This is the part that actually holds everything together. Again, this is not supposed to be on very tight. There we go, see. I think that's only like 20. Not a lot. Not a good smell. If you smell something that smells like sulfur, if you've ever been to a sulfur springs where you have that really sulfur smell, that's usually grease that's impregnated with water, and it usually becomes pretty nasty. So, yeah, that smells like sulfur. Okay, I kind of had to jerry rig to hold all this parts up. Sometimes it's a little easier when you have the handlebars still on. I took the handlebars off, and then I would connect them up off of something in the rafter there to hold them up out of the way to hold all this. So right now I've got them all kind of jerry rigged in here, but this is what you want to look at. That's the race. All right, so that's the part right here. You want to run your finger across this. If you feel any notching, anything, if you'll actually be able to see it as well. It'll look like little vertical lines where the bearings have rubbed in. This is still the factory grease. It smells really bad though. But the race feels good. So, don't have to worry about that at least. The top. That's an interference fit. I really don't want to pull that out. I recommend is you try to push the bearing to one side and push it as hard as you can with your thumb while you spin it around. If you feel anything that feels like rocks in there, you don't want that. But this is actually really, really smooth. It just smells bad. So get some new grease in there. And then this is, make sure you're able to see that. These are the bearings at the bottom. Again, the grease is actually okay. The bearings all look good. So I'm just going to lubricate everything and put it back. Sorry, my GoPro turned off. I cleaned up the bottom bearing. Basically just cleaned it the same way I did the needle bearings yesterday. Repacked it with grease. Slid it up in there. Underneath this one, that spanner wrench, you have to torque that one to, I remember what the number was, 29 foot-pounds. And you basically swap. You basically, make it rock from left to right 4 times. Then you back it off a quarter of a turn. And you basically leave it there. Then you put the upper triple tree on. And this you leave loose. You do not tighten until after you put the fork tubes back in. Otherwise, you're going to tighten this thing down and they might be offset. And you don't want that. So you basically wait until you put the fork tubes back in. But this is 72 foot-pounds is the torque for this. At least on this year. You should check your manual just in case they changed it for some crazy reason. Sometimes they do. This is one of those markers I was talking about that you can use to mark your torque on your bolts. It goes on there easy, and then you can actually wipe it off after you've covered a couple 100 miles and you're fine with it. You can go ahead and wipe it off. So These are nice. Okay, this is my old triple tree off of my 2018 Scout. They're the same size. And I just basically put the fork in here. You could tell this triple tree is bent. So that's why it's not on the bike anymore. But I'm just going to use it to hold everything together and to keep that tube from rotating while I break it free. Usually I would have done that before I took them off the bike, but I wasn't thinking about it. There we go. Pull this out. So that's just a triple tree. Normally you'd put them back on the bike and tighten down the pinch bolt while you undo them. But since I had one, why not? Now, one tool that I have found that you almost always end up having to purchase is a really long Allen key. So this is if you're planning on replacing everything inside, including the seals. Which I haven't actually decided. I think I'm just going to do it. Let's try this again. Put this one in here. Make sure you get it really well seated. This one I always worry a little more about because there's the threads in it, and I really don't want those threads. Let me put that here. Let me see, which way would I do it? Go like this, maybe. There we go. That one feels like it did actually pop free. Again, we'll find out here in a minute. It might not have. It might be spinning inside there. And that sucks. And I hate it when that happens. But hey, it does happen. So, right here is your dust seal. You can take a thin screwdriver blade or a pick, whatever it is you have, to get in there. I usually use my little pry bar, my little Stanley pry bar. Try to go in there gently. Raise that up. See a little twist. Hopefully you can see that. Off it comes. So that is the dust seal. Hopefully you can see down in there, there's some rust or mud. Shouldn't be rust because that should be the oil seal. So it's probably mud, but you really don't want that in there either. And you normally take a thin screwdriver, get it on this little metal clip. It's a retaining clip. You can usually pop it up just like that. If you can find the end, it makes it a little bit easier. And so that's the retaining clip. Don't let the ends of this rake your actual fork tube here, because these are kind of sharp and they will scratch. And there we go. That pops up like that. I'm gonna pull that out because we're definitely replacing that. And again, this one's got mud or something down in there. Whatever you do, don't get the screwdriver and scrape it along the actual tube. That would be bad, because any little abrasions on here, as this goes up and down, you know, providing you're dampening, if there's any little cuts on there, any little even rough spots, it's going to cut that fork seal, and then you're going to have oil leaks. So we don't want that. All right, so now let's take the top off and drain the oil out. I do actually have a little palm connector for these sockets, but I'm not using it. So as you undo this, there is a spring in there, there is some tension, and it'll pop out just like that. So just keep your hand over it. There is a spacer that sits here, the spacer, and then you have your spring. So it's also a washer. So the washer sits between the spring and the spacer. And now I'm just going to turn it upside down. And drain that sucker down in there. One thing you'll notice with this spring, it has the tighter coils towards the bottom, the more spaced out coils towards the top. This is upside down right now. I actually don't think it matters because the spring is the spring, but you know, that's the way it came out, so that's the way we'll be putting it back. These are always fun to try to get everything out of. There's a little piston in there, so make sure you try to get all that out of there you can. So now I'm just going to undo this. Remember, there's a spring here, it's under tension, so keep your hand there. There we go. Try to keep it pop me in the face. Suck it down. There's the cap, spacer, and we have a washer, and then the spring. So we're gonna turn it upside down and drain all that oil out. While you're doing this, you want to be looking at all of this and making sure there's no scratches, no pitting, no surface rust. These actually look really good. I'm kind of impressed. Because any little cut here, as it actuates up and down inside the oil seal there, it will cut that seal and cause you to have a leak. So I've seen lots of people who, they buy new seals, they put them in, and then a few weeks later they're leaking again. And it's usually because they have something on the cylinder itself that's actually cutting it. Fork, set it down so that it's tilted up so it won't leak, because there's still oil in there, even though we got most of it. Then I try to take a rag and just wipe these down. Now this is something you should never see, but I'm going to mention it because I saw it on my last Scout that I worked on, this black one back here. If you take the spring out and it is bent, like at an angle, when you have it standing straight up and down, it's not straight up and down, it's bent, you need to replace that spring. Don't put that back in because it's going to be rubbing on the insides of the fork tubes and you will actually wear them out. That almost always means the bike was in an accident. So if you knew it was in an accident, like I did, I knew that bike was in an accident. Not a big deal, but I did have to replace the springs because they were like at a 45-degree angle. They were not good at all. So this actually looks fine. No rust. If you have any rust, you can just take sandpaper. You shouldn't have any because this is literally sitting in oil all the time. It should be fine. But you never know. Sometimes someone had an oil leak and they didn't replace it in time. And so this has been sitting out of oil for a while. So I just always like to check them. Again, I'm looking for any scratches, any sign that it's rubbing on the inside of the tube, because that's bad. Another thing I see, people drop these down inside the fork tube and they don't make sure that they're laying flat on top of the spring before they add the spacer. And then this gets either twisted or warped somehow. Make sure it's laying flat when you put it on there. If this is in any way not flat, just replace it. I mean, they're a couple cents. It's not expensive. Now these spacers are different for different years of Scout. I don't know why. I haven't bothered to research it. I think it's just introducing a different preload. The 2018 Scout that I have there had a really short spacer in it. This one obviously has like a 3-inch spacer. So I don't know. I don't know why they did that. All right. Now we got all the oil out of there. Well, most of it. Still gonna be some in each one of these. You should see the oil coming out a consistent color. If you see anything silver, that is the lining of the fork tube basically being rubbed off. But usually you would have also seen it on the spring, so I didn't see anything. I should have mentioned a few minutes ago, if all you're going to do is change the fork oil, don't take that dust cap off. You don't need to crack the Allen key on the bottom. All you have to do is pull that off, drain the oil out, pump it. You know, you still have to take the spring out, but then you put your oil in, so then you can skip forward to that part. But because I am going to replace these seals because they either have rust or dirt in them, I'm not sure which one, I am going to have to actually get that out of the bottom before I can actually take them apart. So just in case you didn't know, you don't have to do this unless you're replacing the seal. Okay, this is going to look bizarre, but I promise this has usually worked for me in the past. So I'm in that situation where the Allen key at the bottom there does not want to come loose. It's actually just spinning inside. So one of the things you can do is actually just take a broomstick handle, put it down in there, metal, soft. You know, it's not metal. This is wood. It's a soft wood. Therefore, it should not disfigure the metal. Then you should be able to put this in the top. I will need to still block it. This is going to be awkward. Let's see if I can get that to pop.
A few moments later.
See if that's enough to hold it. Got it. So, that was ugly, but it did work. Now that we have the bolt out of the bottom, now we can actually take this apart. There's a bushing at the bottom here. There's a bushing up here. So now, feel that come up. You feel a metal on metal. You pull, and it should come straight apart, just like that. Wipe all that down. So there is a bushing here, right? That's the one that stays at the bottom. This is the other bushing that actually ends up at the top here. Then there's a washer, and then there is the actual oil seal itself. So this particular oil seal, you can tell there is a little metal ring down inside there, hopefully. And this is the actual piston down at the bottom. That's the part that the Allen bolt goes into that we were trying to get to hold still because it'll spin inside here very easily. So, but for our purposes, we're not replacing any of these bushings or anything. So all I have to do is get this one off. We want to make sure we feel all of this and make sure we don't feel any nicks in there. While you're running this up and down, you should be able to feel, does it feel smooth or not? And if you feel something while you're going up and it wants to stop right there, just stop and take a look, because there probably is something on the fork tube. Yeah. Just one little tiny, feels more like a dirt spot than anything else. I'll take that seal. You can see the metal. There's a little metal band in the middle there. That goes up. So I always take these and set them the way that I took them out. That way I'll remember how the new one's going to go in. Okay, down in the bottom of this fork tube, which it might be a little hard to see. Let me see if I can get the light in there. Hopefully you can see that. That's the hole where the Allen key comes through. This sits down there. So this sits down in there, and this piece right here slides in like that. So hopefully that makes sense. And yeah, it's going to be messy no matter what you do. You're going to get oil everywhere. Little drips here, little drips there. Try to keep all the hardware down here off of the tube itself so you don't scratch anything. Just to show a little bit, this is that piece that's down in there. And so that's the part that I'm using to wedge right here. You can see that wedged pretty tightly on this one. But that's what I'm trying to get wedged in there to hold it from turning when the nut or the bolt that's here on the end, when you're turning it, it'll just keep turning this inside unless you have something wedged in here to really hold it in place. And so that's what I've been trying to do, is trying to keep that wedged in there. That's why I had to kind of cut it down into a point. Okay, one more trick up my sleeve. I find lots of things on motorcycles, especially if someone used, in this case on the other side they used, it looks like RTV compound or something in there. If that's what's in there, a heat gun will help melt it or soften it up anyway. So get the heat gun on there. I still have the broomstick stuck up in here trying to get it loose. This is taking way longer than literally any other fork I've ever done. But hey, it is what it is. Let's try it now. I've had that going for about 10 or 15 minutes now. Ah, yeah. See? Heat gun to the rescue. Wow, that was a pain in the butt. There we go. Almost up. There's a crush washer underneath that bolt. But sometimes they don't want to come out and you have to take a pick or something. There we go. Yep, it also had RTV in it. Wow, that's really hot. So, someone, probably her dealer, the previous owner, had probably replaced the fork coil at some point and put RTV compound in there. I'm not a fan of that, but hey, each his own. And see how the crush washer came out with it. So, all right, finally. Gosh, that took a long time. Red rubber grease. This is what we will be putting on the new seals. These are the oil seals. And hopefully you can see, these are the dust seals, so they have that little swoosh on the side there. Those go on last. So these, if you look at the old ones, so this is the old one. It's got some rust in there. This is the new one. Put the metal ring side up because that's what you can see here. That's actually, I think, what rusted inside this one was a little metal ring. If you put them in the wrong way, you'll know because they'll actually leak very quickly. So, metal ring side up, which I think on the OEM ones is the letters up. But I have all's balls, or I'm not sure how you, what's their name? All's balls. And theirs is a little different. So make sure you check here. So you want the metal, there's a little metal ring on the inside of it. Make sure that that's facing up when you put it back on there. What I like to do is coat the inside of them with red rubber grease, because you don't want that to dry up. And I put red rubber grease on the outside too, because I want it to sit in there nice and supple. Now before we put any fluid in here, make sure you put this screw back in, this bolt. Because if you don't, it's all your fluid's going to come out the bottom. So I'm going to use my fancy handy dandy stick here again. Give me that little extra purchase. And this is only supposed to be on there 17 foot-pounds. That's not a lot. I'm gonna get it tightened up, and I'm gonna grab my torque wrench. So here we are, 17 foot-pounds. Okay, one tube put back together for assembly. Take this, slide it all the way down in there, right? Get it all the way down in there. Now put this piece on here to make sure that it sits correctly, and then slide them like this until you get it seated all the way down. Okay, now you know it's actually seated there, so we can actually get the bolt back in there without it being, if you just drop it in there and then try to drop this in, you may end up smashing it, and that would be bad. That would be very bad. So now comes the fun part, putting in the oil and the springs. All right, Indian fork oil. Forks take 335 milliliters. This one I actually already used on my other bikes. So that is all that's left in this one. It's almost exactly 300. So I just 3. Keep it a little under the halfway mark there. There we go. That should be good. Now you take the fork, put the spring back in it. I think it, well, now you can't see me. I just think it's easier if you put the spring in first. Then we pour in the oil. Now, a lot of other bikes, you measure the oil from the top. You're actually measuring the air gap. Indian doesn't do that. They just tell you to put 335 milliliters. So you still do need to pump it though, to get any air bubbles out there in there, down at the bottom. Alrighty. Now we want to take the washer. Remember this washer that we had? Set that gently on there and make sure it's aligned. Then we can pull that back up. Put our spacer back in there. Now we have to put this on there. Now, Indian will sell you a tool to do this. I actually haven't needed it before. Of course, famous last words today, right? So usually what I do is I take and I put the socket on top of here like this, and I just put my hand on there. Usually I put it on the floor. Actually, I think I'm going to do that. Put it down on the floor so I can get a little bit of weight behind it. You pull up on the outside while you're pushing down, and voila, there you go. Now this I will wait to torque when it's back in the triple tree, because it's pretty much impossible to torque while you have it by hand here. I just want to get it all the way down, get it tight, make sure that it actually actuates a little, wipe down any extra grease, any of that red rubber grease that might still be there, because now we don't need that. That's it. One fork down. This fork oil is good for 2 years. You're supposed to change it every 2 years. Now, if you don't have seals leaking or anything, everything still looks good. You don't need to go as far as what I did today. I just have no idea how old these are, and while you got it all apart, like, why not go ahead and do it? There we go. Like I said, Indian makes a tool to do this. I just had never needed it. On one of my Triumph bikes that I had, it was a lot harder to get the springs back in, and so I did use it there. I did actually buy a spring compressor for that. I did not replace the bushings, but those bushings were there. You saw. You could have just taken them off while we had it apart. You don't normally replace the bushings unless, again, you see all copper or they're actually getting uneven wearing. Like, honestly, I have seen bikes with like 60,000 miles and you still didn't need to replace them. So, you know, everything's good on this one. And so now I'm ready to reinstall them. It's kind of late though. It's been a long day. I think I might do that tomorrow. Whew, that was a long day. It's about 10 o'clock at night now. Working on the Scout. Forks are done now though. That was a royal pain in the ass though. I have never had forks take me that long to do, but hey, they're done now. So I mentioned a few minutes ago about tomorrow I'll put them on. No, I won't, because I still have to put the radiator in. And I definitely don't want to do that while the forks are on there. So good news is I went inside for dinner and got a box from Indian, and my hose actually came in early. So that's a good thing. That's pretty awesome. So maybe I'll be able to do the radiator tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.